I speak to you in the name of the living God, blessed Trinity, and lover of our souls. Amen. Hands clasped in the cradle of your lap as you sat before a full plate at the kitchen table. Hands clasped within a loved one's fingers as you bow your head in prayer. Hands clasping the screen shoved as close as you can bring it to your face as you hold your loved ones in your heart and glimpse them in their own chairs at their own tables, miles away from the annual meal you had grown so used to sharing. How did you say grace this Thanksgiving? Grace. It's the word we use to describe the short prayer of thanks before a meal. Grace is a blessing to our bodies and souls. Grace is God's love freely given. Grace comes to us from the Latin gratia, a gift, favor freely given, translated from the New Testament Greek word charis. Charis is the word from which our central Christian practice of Eucharist gets its name. And grace to you is the phrase that begins our epistle reading today. Grace is Paul's greeting in his letter to the church at Corinth. And his writings present the theological concept of grace to us as unmerited, effective, medium by which God forgives us and loves us. What is grace to you? Is it God's forgiveness and healing? Is it the gift of your salvation? Is it the seal of your own participation in the divine life? Christian theologians tell us that grace is God's absolutely free gift and not the result of human works. It's necessary to free the human will from bondage to sin, making it possible to choose what is good, to choose goodwill toward one another. Grace is said to be irresistible. It transforms us. Grace in Greek can also be translated as kindness. Now, this primitive word, the root word charis, indicates an extension of one's body, wrapping yourself around someone else, a leaning towards someone to share something good with them. In my own mind, I think of it as how it's one thing to receive a kiss on the cheek, and another entirely to know that the kiss is coming and to lean into it. Grace is like a kiss from God that we always know is coming. We always know is available to us. God is always puckered and present to smush us in the face. But we can be like petulant lovers at times, so quick to turn our cheek away from the kiss of grace. I was speaking with an elementary school teacher this week who had shared the difficulties of COVID-induced online education. Much of what she shared is corroborated by an article that I read in an October edition, the New York Times Online. It was titled, "What It's Like to Be a Teacher in 2020 America." The article began with history behind how teaching adolescents became a female-dominated profession. More than 150 years ago, Massachusetts lawmakers came up with a radical idea. All young people should be educated. So the Commonwealth passed the country's first law requiring the children to go to school. But then they were left wondering where to find the teachers they needed to educate all those children. And a school committee in Littleton, Massachusetts came up with a simple solution. God seems to have made women particularly suited to guide and develop the infant mind. That's what the committee wrote in 1849. They also wrote, why pay men $20 a month when a female could do the work more successfully at 1/3 of the price? So not only did women appear uniquely fitted to the work of teaching children, they also didn't have competing professional opportunities that would drive up their wages. So the argument was, look, women will learn to be better mothers by practicing on other people's children. And as other states followed Massachusetts' lead, the public schools opened across the country and they were filled with female teachers. By the late 1880s, women made up 63% of the country's teachers. Now that figure is closer to 76%. And I learned in conversation with this particular teacher that the reality of teaching merging with child care has become so obvious and apparent during COVID-19 quarantines, while parents are struggling to work from home, as their children are struggling to learn from home. And who is watching them? Who is tending to them? This teacher knew that she was being asked to do work she hadn't signed up for, and to do it for less pay than her education deserves. But in the conversation, her final words to me were, I realized that when I give grace to my students and their parents, I'm actually giving grace to myself. When I give it away, I'm learning it for myself. And it had me thinking that there's this fine line between grace and self-justification. You see, grace is not backing down from unjust practices or unfair pay. Grace is often juxtaposed with mercy because grace recognizes the ways in which we've been wronged, but chooses to respond with kindness anyway. Truth and kindness. Grace is giving to others what isn't deserved or hasn't been earned. And somehow, in giving it, we get it for ourselves. Perhaps this realization explains some of the mystery of how God's grace is unconditional, unlimited, unrelenting. In perpetually giving away the gifts of forgiveness and love, God retains an infinite supply. Grace falls like snow. It covers us. Grace falling like snow is a theme in one of my favorite songs. And the words come to mind. Have you been worrying too much lately all night? Whatever we've lost, I think we're going to let it go. Let it fall like snow. Because rain and leaves and snow and tears and stars, and that's not all, my friend. They all fall with confidence and grace. So let it fall. Let it fall. I can't pretend to know what life is like for you this holiday season, what you need to let fall. But I know that like everyone else, you're caught in this COVID-19 blizzard. Some of you are working jobs you never signed up for. Some have lost jobs you thought you'd have until you died. Some have stared death in the face of loved ones or glimpsed it in the mirror of sickness. Some are just struggling to care for house and home and the most vulnerable. However frightening it feels when the winds are swirling around you, This blizzard is held like a snow globe cupped in the hands of a gracious God. When you find yourself clasping your hands in the cradle of your lap at the kitchen table to say grace for what you are thankful for, God is clasping your snow globe, cradling you in her lap. When you clutch your phone like a prayer, as if it were the hand of a family member or friend, God is clutching you to his chest, drawing you toward the source of all grace in his unconditional heart. I wonder if there is something for us to learn, no matter how old we are, from the teachers among us. That grace is the light and the color of our lives. It is the goodwill that allows us to keep going. Kindness toward one another, assumptions of good intent. Grace is the poetry of our lives, and as one poet put it, perhaps this is the time for you to compute the impossibility that there is anything but grace. So as we move through the most unusual holiday season of the century, I invite you to keep clutching this question like hands folded in prayer. What is grace to you?